I'll start. This will be my first question. Would be this might take you the whole time just to answer this one. So, what drew you to this field, and why did you stay? And maybe some prompts that could go with that would be what inspires you. You know, even after all this time, what inspires you about neurofeedback and the community, the EEGer community, the clinicians that do neurofeedback.
Okay, I guess I can answer that. I really was in aerospace, you know, building fighter airplanes and such. And Siegfried Othmer convinced me to go to work for him. And I thought, this is my time to get out of aerospace and do something meaningful, you know, that would help people. Mm-hmm. And so I left off and did that. And then I wound up having to write a whole new set of software anyway, because that was right at the time when software went from DOS and the whole things to Windows. Mm-hmm. So then I had to write all new software for that. And so what's kept me going all this time is actually the clinicians. You know, the clinicians are doing something I consider really valuable. And when I wrote EEGer, I wrote it as a tool. I mean, I had no preconceptions about what it was supposed to do. Just remember, I came out of aerospace. You know, dropping a bomb isn't what you do on somebody. So I try to write a tool to have clinicians able to do stuff, you know, whatever they were going to do. And it seems it's been successful. And we've been through a number of iterations of management. And so actually in 2011, when the previous company closed, Patty and I got a call one Thursday night saying, I'm going to close the company. Would you take over all the clinicians? And, you know, we had some agonizing time and said, okay. And it started off with just Patty and I doing everything. And then Lars and Karen came out to visit and said, well, we could do some of this. And so we transitioned the company over to Lars. Because, you know, I'm 79 now. Somebody else needs to be able to work on this. Luckily, we've got Lars found a good person to work on software, so it's not just me. So I'm still in it because I still think it provides value to people.
Can I ask you, Howard, what did clinicians teach you about how you design, you know, about your designing of the software? What did you learn from clinicians?
Okay, the first thing I learned is no preconceptions, because I said, oh, well, this is how it ought to work. No, that's not exactly how it works. And so the clinicians came to me over a long period of time saying, well, can you do this? Can we do that? You know, this is really good for Parkinson's. This is really good for other things. And so I would add them into EEGer. The joke in the tech support people is EEGer, it's in there, you know, because I never took anything out. So it's gotten so complicated, even I have trouble these days, but it still does everything at the top level that the clinicians have asked me over time. So they still ask from time to time.
Maybe just, you know, you mentioned Parkinson's, and that was just, you know, that was just one. Maybe just give an idea over the years what clinicians have asked, like what kinds of, what kinds of issues have they asked you about?
Okay, so, I mean, a number of things. First of all, they wanted some variation in the feedback displays, you know, because they would say, the clients get tired of seeing the same thing all the time. Although from my viewpoint, gee, that's good. That's one of the things we're teaching to deal with is boredom. But also they wanted different ways of providing reward feedback, you know, changing the time intervals. I mean, there's logic in there that I'm sure nobody uses that makes it really hard to get rewards, you know, saying you have to be on state for some amount of time before you can even get a reward. And it can be difficult, and that can be frustrating. But, people ask for it. Okay, I'll put it in.
Mm.
So, really it's when people ask for something, first I say no, and then we put it in. So don't say it.
I wonder if it would be okay for me to jump in because I work with Howard daily. I kind of know that there are things that he means that that may not come across, right? Like, so for example, when he's talking about like boredom being something that we want people to deal with, I think those are the words he used. What he's talking about there is the idea that the neurofeedback process is brain training, and it's not about the just entertainment and excitement on its surface, that there is a deeper sort of learning process that's going on. And so that, and there still isn't sufficient research really to know how those things interplay. Obviously, there's some interaction between how much people are attentive to the game, how much they're entertained by the game, as well as how much their brain is just getting information about, like, oh, this is the correct, this is the direction that I'm being encouraged in. So yeah, there's a lot underneath there. Like, Howard will answer something in a couple of sentences, and I know that there's several paragraphs hidden underneath.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Lars. That's great. Maybe we'll hear from you, Patty, just to address those first introductory questions.
I really am more of the administrative people person. I don't really understand what happens, and to me it's kind of miraculous, but I've watched Howard over the years develop this software for a variety of clinicians who've come along, who've been very instrumental in helping him determine what kinds of things would be useful in a clinical setting. And he's always been able to come up with something really unique. And so people like Seaburn, who've been on board with Howard for a very long time, have been instrumental. And I always like to, when I would talk to folks on the phone, I would always use Seaburn as an example. When people were calling to find out about getting neurofeedback education, when a psychologist or a social worker was interested in learning about the therapy, I would quote what Seaburn would say, and she'd say that there are other softwares out there, but for her, EEGer is the clinical software because it's so flexible, and the clinician is making the decisions and can really tailor it to each individual, and each session can be tailored to a moment to moment what's happening with that particular client. So it just seems like it's a very useful tool. And my role was really trying to help therapists who were looking to get involved find Ed and Mary in their class and start from the beginning and really learn about neurofeedback and try to incorporate it into their practice. So I was more on the people side, not so much on the technical side, but it is, it's humbling to work with so many fantastic clinicians who are doing, so much wonderful work out there.
Yeah, some of the best times we had were the conferences where we had all the people there explaining what they were doing, which was different than we had expected, but it all worked.
Yeah, the community of clinicians has always been important, particularly because they could come together and share what they were doing and learn from each other. And because neurofeedback wasn't at least 20 years ago as readily available, people were sharing and learning from each other, which is one of the real purposes of putting together a conference, because it's not so much having a keynote, telling you what they're doing, but it's really about the interpersonal relationships of the different clinicians sharing what they do, and then having those connections throughout the year. So to me, that was a really important part of the whole EEGer. you know.
I should start off by reminding everybody that we got started in this in 1998, and Patty was the organizational person behind all of this. Setting up conferences and all the rest of that. So
yeah. Just out of interest, do you have any idea? This is a question for all three of you, maybe Lars mostly. Just how many countries EEGer is being used in, and how many clinicians there are worldwide using EEGer at the moment?
Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer. I mean, the lion's share of users are in the United States and Australia. There are users in Europe and at least one in India, Serbia. There are several users in Korea. There are some in China.
South Africa.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
South Africa, and as well as Tanzania. So yeah.
About 15 in New Zealand now, I think.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And quite a lot in Australia, obviously. Yeah. I
wonder if it would be all right for me to jump in again.
Please do.
Patty has a habit of really underplaying the sort of pivotal role, and I think Howard alluded to this when he says that she was sort of organizationally critical for EEGer. And I would go, for me, it's like the inspiration for the direction that EEGer, EEG Learn, EEG Educational Research has gone, is this idea of really cultivating and strengthening the relationships between clinicians. Because one of the things that I think is just amazing about the EEGer community is just how open to learning from one another the clinicians are. And Patty has played a vital role in creating the space for those relationships to flourish and for those educational opportunities to happen. So that's really important.
Yeah, great, thank you.
And over the years, Monique, I really found that there was very little competition, or it was really very collegial, and I thought that was really interesting in that whole group of professionals, that you really didn't, there wasn't the ego so much. It really was sharing what they were doing, because they were all so dedicated.
Perhaps, and this is a question for all three of you. The theme of the ANSA conference this year is neurofeedback, in uncertain times, and with a specific emphasis on trauma. So, all the speakers at the conference are coming from that field. And perhaps just some thoughts about what you've noticed over the years about the way that this software, or this whole approach, neurofeedback and EEGer software, has been utilized to address trauma. It's a huge question, of course.
So I'm not sure where to leap in here, because once again, I don't pretend to understand how this works. I only know that we provide different methods for retraining the brain, or for raising activity or decreasing activity in the brain. And the fact that it works really well for trauma leads me to believe that we're in the right path. But beyond that, I'm not sure I could say what's else. I once again said that I really created EEGer as a tool because I didn't know what needed to be done. So I didn't want to preclude anybody doing anything.
Yeah. Would you have, either of you, Lars or Patty, have something to add to that, or your own take on that?
Well, I would offer that part of it has to do with the tool that Howard has developed. And when he was answering the question earlier about responding to clinician input, that has really been an approach that we have continued and will continue to develop, which is that we want to create, you know, some of it I think really comes from a personal ethic that Howard has to create a tool that is transparent. You know, he's gotten into trouble before because he says honestly what he sees in how devices operate and other softwares operate and so on. And that means that EEGer transparently provides, you know, a tool that clinicians can use. The downside of that is, of course, the clinician needs to kind of know what they want to do with it. This is not a one size fits all. You just push the button and go. But as an example of some of the things that, you know, that Howard referenced earlier, but didn't describe them in particular, for example, being able to see the frequency, all of the frequency bands, being able to see both the inhibits and the reward, being able to change the minimum time on task, which is how long a person needs to be in a reward state before they get a reward, being able to change, you know, sort of in granular fashion, making changes to how the feedback is actually happening. There's several ways that EEGer actually does that. So all of those ways make it possible for the clinician to really see what's happening and have a really you know, intimate connection to the way the software is working on the person. But there's the other thing, which is really what Patty has brought to it, which is this idea of clinicians speaking to one another. And one of the things that really sets EEGer clinicians apart is a reliance on the therapeutic process. So that relationship between the therapist and the client is critical, is really important. And that's, you know, as Seaburn has sort of brought out over the period of the last few years, it is not only the training part where the person begins to change their brain, but it is their relationship with the person who's the stand-in as the other that actually draws them to this thing of being able to come out of, you know, a severe history of, say, developmental trauma or any of those kinds of things. So I think those two things are really the thing that provide for EEGer being accessible and that I hear positive things back from trauma clinicians.
I also think that over the last 20, 25 years, that clinicians have been experimenting. One of the things that Seaburn always recommended is to train as a new clinician, train yourself so you understand. And many clinicians are physician heal thyself. These are people that have had trauma in their life, so they know of what they speak. And so learning on themselves and translating that to helping a community of people that have also been traumatized, it's been a tremendous learning process over the last 20 years.
I'd like to go back to something I said before, is that I started off without preconceptions, you know, sort of. One of the preconceptions is, oh, there's a reward band. That's what drives everything, is you control the reward band. But I know clinicians now that rarely use the reward band. They all work on inhibit frequencies. They said that's the thing. I don't care what goes on, because you know, it's whatever works for that clinician's style is what works.
So I think what, you know, if I just respond to that, really from what you're all saying, is that this is that the whole principle behind this is real flexibility and to be able to be individualized.
And isn't that everybody's brain? Everybody's brain is different, and it is flexible. We found, you know, the brain can learn and retrain itself given proper tools and the right, you know, environment and the right clinician to help them.
Maybe just a little bit more about yourselves, what your plans are going on now, since you've been doing this for a long time.
Well, let's see. I like to say I'm retired, sort of, but people tell me I've been a failure at that for years. So, so I'm actually still working on some things with the people back in Florida. You know, Zoom makes it work. and we're still going through odds and ends of things, trying to get a new release out, which I anticipate any minute now, right?
Mhm.
And and then we have another pool of development to go on right behind that. So that's what I'm really doing.
Mhm.
For me, COVID came along and completely changed course for me. Because we weren't doing any courses for a couple of years, it was an opportunity for me to actually take a step back. And Lars worked very hard initially when COVID hit, and we realized we wouldn't be seeing Ed or Mary in a hotel anytime soon. That was not going to be happening. He stepped up and really started the online learning with EEG Learn, getting courses ready, interviews, did an amazing job, and it really gave me permission and gave me the space to step back. And so that's all kind of running seamlessly now. I'm just here to support Lars and Ed and Mary in whatever tasks they need me to help with. But otherwise, I'm pretty much, a background player at this point.
Mhm. So I think in a way what you're speaking to there, Patty, is partly answering the other question, which is these uncertain times that we've been living in, and how you yourself have responded to that in terms of running the business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we most of it is really all the day-to-day business parts of it are all Lars' responsibility. Everything fell on Lars kind of all at once. I mean, he obviously took over. I think it was it 2012 or 2013, Lars? And from that point forward, he was really in charge of all the business parts.
So maybe can we get you to speak to that a little bit, Lars? Just your, what it was like for you to take over, what it's been like to be at the helm during this pandemic, and where you see the future going.
Yeah, wow, that's a big question. I guess the first thing I would say is that I feel an amazing amount of gratitude about being where I am and doing the work that I do. I almost probably 2 or 3 times a week, I have to stop and go, wow, how is it possible that I got to this point in my life and I'm working with some of the most interesting and really thoughtful people that I could have imagined. I also feel lucky that I'm working, Patty and Howard are my in-laws, and so it's it's this amazing family project that we, I have an excuse to call my mother-in-law and my father-in-law on a regular basis and just kind of check in with them and see how things are going. And so that's really, really great. And I guess the thing as far as like where EEGer wants to go and where it seems like it could go, I guess I end up in a state of wondering about the direction that the world as a whole is going and how an organization can be prepared for that kind of upheaval and uncertainty. Mm. That's really the work that I feel like we're doing as much as possible. It's not a new thing to most people that there's a mental health epidemic going on for numerous reasons. And as climate instability continues to ramp up, and there's a rise in sort of authoritarianism and any number of things that really trigger people's devastating histories, then there's going to be a real need for people to be available to help with that, to help create healthy communities, to help create healthy ways of interacting and relating to one another. And the core impulse that I think Patty and Howard brought to developing EEGer and developing the EEGer community is really, it says a lot about something, what provides a future for us, which is that it's necessary for us to find ways to really cultivate and strengthen the relationships and the learning processes and the tools that we can use in order to give people safe places and healthy relationships.
Thank you, Lars. That takes it really wide, and I think it's and quite philosophical, and that's a good place to go. A memory, maybe from all three of you, and maybe we could make that sort of our closing question to speak to, is a really specific memory from all three of you of being in the EEGer community, seeing what could be achieved. Just something that stands out to you. Was it at a training, at a conference, an interaction with a clinician? What's a memory that each of you have?
Somebody else go first.
I mean, of course, I always think of conferences, because that was the place where we got to, gather and meet and come together, which always just thrilled me to see all the people in their chairs on the opening morning, starting the conference. I just loved just feeling that community, and everybody was very happy to be there. So I don't have one specific conference. I think they all kind of blend together, but my favorite thing was obviously just being at the conference and being there amongst so many wonderful clinicians.
I guess the strongest memory I have is the first time I got stuffed up on stage and people started asking me questions, and I foolishly made reference to some features that nobody'd used before, and then had to spend the rest of the time trying to explain what I meant. So now I'm trying to be more careful.
Yeah, I think for me it would also be a conference. That there's a meeting that happened at every neurofeedback interchange conference that was called the protocol swap, and it was an opportunity for clinicians to get together in a circle. I think the last time we did, we actually broke up into smaller groups in order to make the conversation go by. But I just enjoyed watching people would bring up issues that they were, confronting, and describe what they were doing in the situation, and just ask for feedback. And it's the kind of like a combination of vulnerability and courage and insight that is just, it's really captivating and compelling to see.
Perhaps I pick up the common thread of what all three of you have said there, is that what has been inspiring to you is to see the ongoing open-mindedness and curiosity of the community of people that use this technology, the willingness to learn and to relate to each other.
Yeah, it's not treating it like a fixed solution, but being open to looking to see what's going on and seeing if you can make a change to it. Hopefully it's a good change.